Welcome to The Locker Room, the podcast that delivers practical coaching advice you can implement today. Whether you're a coach, instructor, or educator, we bring you real stories and actionable tips from experts in the field. Each episode explores key lessons from their careers to help you elevate your own coaching. We always wrap up by asking, if you could go back to your first day as a coach, what advice would you give yourself? Let's dive in. So in today's episode, we talked to Tom Gellie. Tom Gellie is the founder of Big Picture Skiing. So he is a ski coach and instructor. He also works with biomechanics. He is a friend of mine I met years ago in Australia. He has represented the APSI twice at Interski in two separate disciplines, in telemark and in alpine. He has a huge breadth of knowledge when it comes to coaching people, and we touch on what we find is important when developing your own skiing and also developing others. Of course, I did ask him what he's working on in his skiing, so we get into that a little bit as well. Let's meet Tom. Hey, Tom.
Steve, good to see you.
You too. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time. That is obviously very full and interesting bio, and I'm sure we won't touch on everything today. On this podcast, we're keen to highlight things that you've learned over your career when it comes to coaching and teaching. You started skiing relatively late, but progressed quickly. So did you have anything, of course there's physical elements to it, but is there anything that you had that you found helped to speed you on?
Don't think there was a specific coaching thing. I didn't grow up being coached that much in sports. I played cricket when I was a young kid and did some golf, bit of tennis. A lot of the sports I was kind of interested in was just play. Like we lived on a bush block, so behind us there was just all state forest, and my brother and I and friends in the street would just go playing a lot. So I've thought about this question a bit and wondered what are some things that contribute to it. One I think that's an important one is to sort of question a lot of things and not take everything at complete face value when someone says something, to be skeptical. I think it's actually really healthy to be like that. And skeptics, like I want to like point out, and I've sort of learned a bit about skepticism. It's not a negative thing. You're just not, if someone goes, "Hey Tom, someone's just made this new ski, it's the best." I'm like, "Steve said it, it's the best." Skepticism is just, making it, it's not taking it straight away, but getting more facts and waiting until you really find out, know more about it. And so I've just had that when people have said something, and if it hasn't gelled with maybe what I've seen or what someone else has said, I try and find out more information. And I think that's been an approach I've taken with everything I've done, and constantly looking for, more, like, this can't just be it. There's got to be more to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've just been doing a level 1 exam actually, and I say this a lot to the people in the group, is just because I say it doesn't mean it's gospel. Like I'm probably saying it for a very specific context, a very specific thing. You can only say anything with certainty if you do put it in its own box. But apart from that, you've got skepticism. That's an interesting one. I like that term.
So, definitely.
And we're talking with that then, a lot of the work you do is heavily like in biomechanics. So there is, and I always find it's interesting with, there's certain things that the body can do, but then there's the element of us. We need to understand what that is first before we allow that to happen, if that makes sense. So how do you find, what's like something that you see coaches using all the time that potentially isn't biomechanically sound, but it tends to slip through the cracks? Or is there a way that you have? Anything
I get your question.
Way,
I think I get your question. Is there maybe given what I've studied and been interested in learning more about the body, do I see something now? It's a common mistake that a listener might go, "Oh, that's me." Right. Well, I would actually say I kind of have almost coming back full circle, getting right into something like understanding the body more. And I even now, I actually sort of shy away from using the word biomechanics if I can.
Right.
Now I use it a lot more when I was learning, because I don't think I was trying to get people to listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a degree in something, or, a name already, no one really wants to listen to you. So unless you use certain sort of terms, and even though I didn't study, like, in inverted commas, biomechanics, I approached trying to find out about the body more through, well, you and I have done a bit of work together,
Yeah.
like structural integration, Rolfing. So like a hands-on experience is what I went through, where I felt my body change, movement, ranges of motion change in a very quick amount of time. I felt greater awareness in my body, and those things made me go, this is really important. It's not necessarily the knowledge of like bones and all that sort of stuff, but being able to feel your own body better is what all the best sports people, movers in the world do. Some of them just can't explain it but their body intelligence is very, very high. And so back to your question, I think maybe it's not a mistake, but my advice would be people just don't really listen to their body enough, or the people that are not progressing as far are just not, like, the noise is there, the information about like pressure's here, strain is there, it's not there, it's coming in, it's just whether you listen to it or not. And like I'll give you a great example of a skiing study actually by a guy named John Shedden. So he's in his 80s now. He's from the UK. He was like the director of snow sports, UK, England. And I think in the 80s he did some research around sensory perception in skiers. Like what sensory stuff do we need to improve and build skill in skiing? And he did a bunch of different stuff, with vision, hearing. But the one that I found the most fascinating is where he talks about how he anesthetized with some anesthetizing gel. So he made advanced skiers and beginner skiers' legs and feet numb, and then observed what the effect was. So you would probably think, like, the advanced skiers would do better, but actually it affected the advanced skiers way more. They skied far worse than their normal. The beginner skiers didn't really ski that differently. And so he draws this conclusion that, like, advanced skiers, we've just learnt to filter out all the noise and the information coming into our body, and just, from the thousands of things, 3 things, 1 thing, just going to feel for that with a myriad of everything else going on. Whereas a beginner is just overwhelmed, like being at a loud concert with someone tapping them on the shoulder, and it's just too much. Whereas, advanced skier has filtered that out. So I think people, if people could focus on that, and then back to the biomechanics thing, focus on how their body is really feeling and behaving to themselves and the senses there, they'll get a whole bunch of information. And some of that information might actually be even more relevant and powerful than what an expert, inverted commas again here, has said you should or you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
So
we have a friend of mine here who runs a school. We talk about this, and it's funny because obviously you have the YouTube, I have the YouTube as well. He talks about that, like, could the person in your lesson, could have they just have done it off of a YouTube one, or are you actually working with them and the environment to help? It's that sort of thing. Like, are you listening to what they're saying and adjusting accordingly, or are you just blanketly saying what you think they should do next?
Yes.
So that's always I always find that the good frame to run it through. It's like, am I just saying?
And I think you and I are probably very guilty of that early on, and it's hard not to be guilty of it when you're new at teaching something, because you're trying to draw on as much information as you've got on the topic to try and help it. And okay, well, someone said if skidding happens at the end of the turn, stand here.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of testing, you're hypothesizing. I think people fall in the trap of, like, expecting, like, just saying that over and over instead of going, did that work?
Yes. Yeah.
And then building your own
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Library off of that.
It sounds like then that, so when you are coaching people, getting to them trying or them being able to feel something rather than you explaining heavily. What's the time where you've noticed that happen in real life? Where, like, I guess, how could you get to that point quickly? Is there something that you manage with the environment, or is there particular drills, or do you find it's the way you set up the tasks that you're asking them to do? Or, you're saying,
So
how
tell
do
me,
you guide them? How do
is
you
it
guide?
more, okay, so it's not how do I myself,
Oh no,
more
sorry.
how,
Oh well, both then. If yeah,
okay.
and has one helped with the other?
Yeah. Well, the most honest thing would be talking about my own experience
Mm.
of what I do to feel and change things. And I would say a big part of it, like some of the best changes in my skiing have come through discovering a new feeling outside of skiing first. So I went and did at one point this course with a guy named Gary Ward,
Mm-hmm.
who has this sort of anatomy in motion, and that's his sort
Yeah.
of company name. But his model of how the body moves is called the flow motion model, and he's tracked and mapped and spent so much time figuring out what each joint in the body does at different phases of the gait cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
because he's like, okay, if we walk everywhere, that's kind of the oldest human movement thing. That's an inbuilt pattern. We don't really need to be taught it. If that's how the body moves, let's try and figure it out. And then you use that as a map to help guide you into problems like say knee pain or hip pain or something like that. So you compare like what's going on at one point in this model to what the person is presenting. So I did this course and I learned all this stuff about the gait cycle and how to spot when something was out of place. And I felt all these like totally new feelings and was able to make my own links of if the foot is supinating or if it's moving one way, it's inverting,
Mm-hmm.
then the knee usually has a corresponding like linking roll
Mm-hmm.
that moves with it. Then the hip does something and then the upper body. And so you learn like how a change at the big toe affects whether your head wants to turn left or right or tilt
Mm-hmm.
to the right or extend or flex.
Yeah.
And so you get this really like awesome picture of how it's all connected. So when I learned that, then I started looking for, instead of like, say, for example, in skiing, just this general upper and lower body separation idea, I kind of followed the more thoughts of, okay, well, if the foot is, everting to edge the ski
Mm-hmm.
and I'm, doing this at this phase of the turn, what's going on up the chain and does it fit with what everyone else says?
Mm-hmm.
And and so I found and discovered some things like that were different to the, I guess, teaching or the theory that I'd been taught in the past, or just gave a far more detailed lens to it. And then so with that, that's kind of opened up new movements. I was like, okay, well, if that foot is doing this and the knee is bending in this way and the hip is going that way and then the rib cage is doing something else, I've never thought about doing those things in combination. I'm going to try that
Mm.
and see what happens. So back to the reason, experimenting with movement off snow
Yeah.
really helped me then take it on snow.
Mm. Yeah. And it's similar, like you said, when you were growing up, like play was a big element. And as soon as you said that before, I know we've spoken about this before, like there should be an element of play. I think you even posted on your story last night, right? Like it's like a freedom of playing and almost, I know you said you look for the result or the feeling, but it's not something specific that you're looking for. It's like, it's to be aware of the feeling without it
That's right.
searching for something in particular. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I would say that is kind of right. It's like, what happens if I light a bag of dog poo on fire and I've never done that before and I put it at my neighbor's doorstep and I stand there, what's going to happen? Like you're going to learn pretty quick how, and then you change and adapt things
Yeah.
to that. And then speaking of that story that I posted, there was a really great study that I just heard of around creativity in sports, and it's linked to skill. And so the study focused more on soccer, football, athletes. And in the past, what they'd associated creativity with was the people that would be shown a video of a football match, and then they'd pause it at a point where, say, a player was like right here, and they're like said to the group of people, "What would you do in this moment?" So it's theoretical. It was like, would you chip? Would you try and make it like a fake? Would you step left, right? What would you do? And so the person that came up with the most kind of creative idea or whatever, that they were deemed like a creative player. However, this study wanted to just check that. So they then went out and got all the soccer players, and they first tested their skill and got all these professional coaches to rank them all separately, like in order from best to worst, of most skilled to least skilled. So they had that list. And then they went and played a game and, then again, ranked them on creativity. And basically, and then they also did the same study with the television and watching video. It didn't correlate. The people that were creative with the video were not the ones that were creative on the pitch, because their skills didn't actually, like, they didn't have the skill. Like, if I can't chip over your head or do a little messy, like, side pass, I could say that's what I would do, but if I can't do it, there's no point. And I think there's so many ski, maybe calling some people out here, ski instructors that like talk all this stuff, but have nothing at all to back it up. They talk all this stuff, like World Cup races do this, blah, 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 professionals do that. But really, like, when it comes down to snow, you have to have that skill owned and felt and yourself to really, then be creative with it. Which I think was just really kind of interesting.
I think ski racing is a great one for that, because I'm lucky here up on the glacier. We see all the ski races come like all from all the nations, but at very slow speed, they do the same drills. They all look the same. There's all the thing, but then it's like when they're on, like, it's like Odermatt always talks about it. He doesn't think at all. He's gone. Like, all the skill development stuff is happened. Then it's the, like you said, the creativity comes out. It's all well and good standing at the top going, "Oh, I'm going to do this here and this here and this here," but when it comes to it, can you actually make it work? That's interesting.
Yeah, like, I've really tried to I try now not to speak about things if I haven't really walked in the shoes. So, it's very easy to, and it's enjoyable to analyze like top level skiers and try and think about what they're doing. But more recently, I've tried to go, I don't actually really know. I have maybe some ideas, but that's probably some area I should go into in my own skiing and really push myself. I should ski down a race course with, big, long, heavy, sharp skis on hard snow and be really out of my comfort zone to really know, what's going on there. Or Benny Walk, like his short turn, people are like, how does he do that? And I'm like, ask him. I try and do it. It's really difficult. And there's a certain set of like conditions, terrain, skis he uses, athleticism is super strong, all these things. So I take those examples are like, I go and try and do it and then see what I, have some hypothesis about maybe what's going on. But trying to do it, that's where you really learn. And then you can pass that on with your students far better. So
I had this before when I first came here, like a decade ago. I think because I was at that point, I had the APSI level 4, all that things. And at that point, it was only there was videos of like Riley online and Paulie online and that sort of stuff. And so like friends of mine here that I worked with were like, "Oh, APSI," and then they had a picture of Riley in their head. Like, "Oh, do you ski like Riley?" I said, "No, I don't ski like Riley. Like, I'd love to, but like we're completely different setups. Like, I'm quite lanky and tall and that, and Riley's not, and he's like built different. He's incredibly strong, and so it's like, it's funny, isn't it? How, but that's always been a thing. I know over the years, it's hard to not. You hear, "Oh, someone is from this place." It's like, "Oh, okay, you've heard or you've seen a person from there." It's hard to not put that on them. So when it comes to that, then in terms of that, you represented the APSI in Alpine and Telemark at Interski. So for those listening that don't know what Interski is, could you give us like a very brief kind of what that's about and what's it for? And then I was going to say, what are some takeaways that you've had? Selfishly for me, one thing I always find interesting about Interski is that anybody can go. So yes, they send teams that are, well-versed in long careers and professional coaches, but then anybody can go to the lectures as well. So I was going to say, so firstly, what is Interski? And secondly, how do you manage when you have such a large group of people with a varied background? Like, how do you manage getting what you want to get across to a group like that?
Yeah, well, so Interski happens every 4 years, and it's a congress where nearly all the skiing nations around the world, if there's an organization that certifies ski instructors, they register and come to this event for about a week, and can present on snow and off snow, like indoor lectures around ski technique, theory, lessons, innovations, technology, whatever it is, to the rest of the world, and then be there to then gather information for their own association and take back home. So the idea is sharing knowledge around snow sports. I should say it's all snow sports: snowboarding, cross-country skiing, freestyle, adaptive snow sports. Everyone is represented nowadays there. So first thing comes to mind is when I went to the first one, in my head, because in the ski instructing world, there's not really competition, so to say. Like there is in a way, like you're trying to get your levels, but then you get to a point where it's like, well, what's the next thing? And then you hear about Interski, and it's like, well, you want to make the Interski team, because then that shows you're, at the top of your game, and then you'll get to see how you stack up and see what the other people are doing around the world. So as a young Interski member, I think the frame of mind you're in when you try it and you go is a competitive one,
right?
Which I think is great. I think it's so good because it really pushed my skiing before the event more than anything, because I wanted to go there and really, do my best. So I went to that event, and the first one I was a telemark skier, and I was the only telemark skier. The rest were alpine, or there was only one telemark skier represented from Australia. And it was a fantastic event. There was so much going on, and really to see like the best Austrian skiers, the best Japanese, Swiss, Americans, Canadians was really inspiring. And so the next part is, did you want to know, like, how did presenting to the rest of the world or the other people listening go, or
both.
or
I
then
suppose there's different elements to it, isn't there? There's indoor lectures that people go to, which is, I guess, because it's talking about the industry at large, isn't it? So there's people from business-minded people go there and learn about the ski instructor, how ski instructing plays its role in the holiday and things like that.
Yeah, all sorts of different topics. It's there's some of those are really fascinating and interesting. And
then the ones that I think the ones that I would probably look forward to are the on snow ones. And I've spoken to people before that have represented, and they find there's two elements to that. There's the time where you're sitting on a chairlift with someone, which is what this podcast is about, like getting a bit more into like what Tom is into rather than necessarily the organization. But then when there's a certain element that you have to deliver what your nation is doing. So how did you find that? How did you set up for that and to make sure you got across what you would plan to get across, and to a variety of people?
So at that Interski, being the sole telemark person, what I wanted to bring across was how I'd looked at alpine skiing and what the best alpine skiers are doing. And around me was Paul Lorenz and Riley McGlashan and Richard Jamison and all the APSI great skiers, Andy Ray, the coach. And so I was taking all that new information, which I was absorbing like a sponge, and finding out like about progressive edging and all these sorts of different types of turns and transitions. And when I looked at telemark, I was sort of thinking, wow, there's not really that crossover into there. Telemark is more about there was still sort of backcountry skiing. You just, as long as you're standing in the stance, you're telemarking, and that's great. And so I wanted to take what I'd been working on in my telemark skiing, which was, I would call like modern telemark skiing, trying to look for performance, like really use the design of the ski to shape the turn and be faster, be more dynamic and exciting. So that's what I presented when I went over there, and sort of drew on how well structured the APSI was in terms of being able to teach other instructors how to sort of teach technique, and how I'd taken those ideas, these transition types and skill blending to my own telemark skiing. And that's why I looked the way I did, and why I skied the way I did. And that was really cool. And I thought there would be a whole lot of other nations doing the same. And I was excited about it. And if I'm to be really honest, I was actually kind of disappointed at that Interski for the telemark side. But then there was a big switch, and it's probably a good thing. I looked at the alpine skiers and was like, wow, this is awesome. And Paul and Riley went to the Korean workshop where there was all these different ideas being presented, and we were talking at night and on the chairlift and everything about it. And they were so excited, and I was just drawn into that. I was like, this is it. I'm gonna move away from telemark. I'm gonna move towards alpine and focus on that, because there's just more growth, more open sort of doors going on there, and there are more people I can learn from, and maybe I could bring that back to telemark skiing at one point. So that was sort of my experience presenting, and then hearing on the first Interski information that was around me.
Was there a jump then, did you feel, in performance when you did make that switch? And then obviously the next 4, it was 2 in a row, right? You went the following Interski, you represented as an alpine member. So it's like, in that period of time, like I know you've mentioned before about having mentors, and maybe Paul and Riley, I've heard you speak about them before. Like, did you feel a change in your technique? Did you improve? Did you and how?
Definitely.
How did you get about that? And was mentorship a part of that, or was it all solely on you, or how did that work?
Massively on the people around me. And Threadbow Ski School at that time was the best sort of melting pot of great skiers from Australia, with the likes of Paul and Riley, and some people, Jeremy Gale, Jez Gale, and Ken Spain, some people that were sort of, had been doing it for a long time. So there was this really great training culture there. And we would always just go out videoing all the time, talking about, it's a half an hour drive from Jindabyne to Threadbow and then back in the car, carpooling, discussing like we're talking about now, different things, and things like, what we saw at Interski. And then YouTube videos, there were more and more YouTube videos coming out. You had to kind of know where to look and what to search, but from Japanese skiers, from Austrians like Richie Berger and Martin Guggenegg. And then you'd, talk to some older, instructors, and they're like, oh yeah, those guys, they used to come to Australia, and they'd talk about them. So there was this sort of gathering of information, inspiration, had some great mentors, people that pushed me, and then, would ski together. That was what really accelerated things, I think, for me. I should say actually too, my feet are not, they don't love ski boots. My mum's given me very bony body parts. My feet are really, bony. And so at this point too, I would say, and working in Australia is hard, isn't it? Like your feet, it's really difficult. If you ever come for a time working in Australia for a season, get ready to know about punching where your sore spots are in your boots. So I started learning a lot about ski boots because I was not comfortable. There was these like spots were rubbing, they were getting sorer. I was doing lots of hours because I'd be training, I'd be teaching. And so there was a big learning, I feel, at that point on ski boots and equipment. And that was great because that helped too. You dial your equipment and you start finding these little like 1-2% things that help you and not get in the way. And through that same time, I then stumbled across structural integration or rolfing. And that was a big, so there's a lot of things going on there that I think came together from multiple different aspects. The equipment, inspiration, mentors, knowing more about the body, doing back-to-back seasons. They all went together to help me advance my skiing.
Yeah, I think it's funny that when we talk, I think I've been thinking a lot about this recently, and you mentioned it before, but like a lot of the things you say there, it's, and like we were saying, the mentorship is good if you're open to it. Like learning about all this stuff is good if you're open to not being attached to what the outcome is. Like you're saying, it's like the mindset you take into all of those we mentioned before.
Yeah.
That's why this podcast is called The Locker Room, for that exact reason. From like down in Oz, you've got a melting pot of instructors from all over the world, and one of them will say something that you've not heard. It's like, okay, I've not heard that, but it obviously works because they've just done it. So it's like, okay, what is that? That you kind of just steal it a little bit and maybe make it work in your own.
Yeah, and I think that's it just makes me think of communication, and that that's like a really difficult thing. So like we've had to come up with words and things to describe what we do with movement, and that is never does it justice, I feel. And that's why I think it is sometimes quite hard to teach well when you have to use words, because what a word means to you can be different to me. And it never really, you put, say, a sentence or two together to describe what you're doing at the top of the turn. But like back to the original kind of thing about that, the advanced skiers versus beginner skiers, thousands of bits of input. I'm also blocking out this feeling. I'm focusing on that feeling. And I did like 200 hours of this to get that. And so there's this distillation that you just go, these like several sentences together to describe what's going on is really, never does the actual movement, the skill, as much justice as it's worth. And I think if people can appreciate that and convey that even as a teacher, like, look, I'm going to do my best, but just realize, a lot of this you're going to have to feel yourself. I'm going to try and guide you, but we've got to like go back and forth. It's going to feel wrong and strange, but that's how you're going to get that felt knowledge of what I'm talking about, and maybe come up with your own words to it, which should probably be the case, because we all bring our own different experiences to everything. So
Absolutely. I was like, there's two parts to that I was kind of touch on. Is firstly, I was going to bring up your son. So like, as he was growing up, I remember you were posting things of him like doing the perfect squat. It's like, well, no one's taught him that. So it's like you can't, at that point, he couldn't speak. So it's like, right. So clearly there's something to that. Language isn't necessarily needed to guide different things. But then I see it as well here with, I live and work in Switzerland. I do speak a bit of German, but I teach in English. And often I'm speaking to people and that's maybe their second or even their third language. So it's like, I always read a lot about communication. There's one that people talk about, that every argument always comes down to like semantics. They always end up arguing about the words that they're talking about, because often people are talking about the same thing, but using a different word for it. And then if you go on long enough with that, if people don't get too angry, then they realize that, oh yeah, we are saying the same thing, but using different words. So I found that in my own coaching over the last decade, is how little I actually speak about skiing, which sounds weird when I say it, but in my lessons. And that, like, yes, using the environment and exactly what you said before, which is why it's interesting. because we've never necessarily spoken about that. We've always spoken about like ski technique or something. But when it comes to coaching, yeah, allowing for a bit of play and not necessarily putting it in black and white, which I think
Yes.
I've heard you talk about it before, and I think about it a lot as well, doing a lot of different systems. I used to think when I would switch systems, it would take a bit for me to learn the new one, the new words and the new thing. And I always used to think that was damn, I'm always like that step behind, like a little step below people that have grown up in the same system. But then actually, it's only been a positive because of what we just said. Like, it's okay, if you have 100 different ways of saying something, it's better than having just one, because if that one doesn't work, you've got nothing. So and so it's all that. It's
have you heard about or have you looked into like the ecological approach to like skill development, motor learning?
No, what's that?
Okay, really good one. I would encourage. That's probably been one of the most interesting areas I've looked into in terms of coaching, understanding coaching, and helping others get better. So I am going to, because I don't have a great memory at times on things, I'll do my best to explain how I understand it.
Yep.
Some of the main principles of this come down to that when people learn, it's really how we interact with the environment is how we perceive the environment is how we then react and behave within it. So, for example, on a concrete road, you're going to realize in that environment you can't ski on it because it doesn't slide very well. You might want to wear shoes because it's hard, not bare feet, versus say sand or grass. There's a difference in grip when we, look at those two different environments. And so it's so important to realize that this is a huge part of how we learn. We look for things like they term it affordances. So within the environment, that environment affords you certain things that you can do. So for example, the concrete, it's not going to be really great if I'm going to come in and we're going to play a game of football and slide tackle.
Yeah.
We're going to slide, but grass totally could be an affordance that we can do. We could have a picnic on grass. Concrete, not as comfortable. On snow, like you and I, compared to the people that haven't spent as much time on snow, we are using a visual system we can see the snow, we can feel the temperature, we've got all this information, and we go, slide and we go, oh, there is no way I'm going to try and do a fast carve turn today because there's ball bearings in the snow. There's I've felt some melt freeze spots. It's really dodgy. There's a big temperature difference going on. I'm not going to do it. And then, the other inspection, we know when it's right. And then same with terrain. Like you can even look at a run now when you're good and you can tell by the slope, the pitch, the angle of things, where it rolls, where it dips. Before you've skied it, because you've done it enough time, you know what that affords to your body, your equipment, doing something. What action can you take there? And so what that really highlights to me is as a coach, you're trying to help your students discover these affordances within the environment. So you're setting tasks, you're helping them guide them into figuring out what happens when you do try and ski fast across ball bearing death cookie snow, so they have an actual felt sense and can recognize it before it happens. So ecological approach to learning has been a really, fascinating area that I've now tried to incorporate with my coaching, especially because I do a lot of it now remotely through video and online. I have to do that because I can't be there.
Yeah.
I have to be teaching them to this is a situation. This is what you're going to go and do to try and discover what I've discovered in those situations when that happens.
I was going to say, how do you find so that's another question I was going to bring up. So you're incredibly international now. I was just talking about how, like, I'm in Switzerland and I can speak to people that are second language and that sort of stuff. And yes, we always talk about ski instructors international, you get people from different things, but you have clients of yours that are from all over the world and that you talk to all the time with your program. How, I guess it's twofold. Do you find that it's changed the way that you've approached then dealing with or when they're coaching people like online, because they might be coming with their own idea of what the process is like?
Yeah.
And then
So much so. And that's like one of the most difficult things. One of the hardest skiers, I'm going to reframe that, to teach is someone that comes with a lot of ideas set in their way, like prior to, us working together. So that becomes something you have to kind of get out of the way first. You have to change sort of the way they think about things before you can get any action, because without even realizing it, they will be blocking. You might not discuss it, but I've had some like incredible breakthroughs. I'll give an example. This guy, I was coaching him. He was in Park City, and he's skiing, sending me videos back and forth. We're working on stuff, and I keep seeing this kind of awkward sort of the way he angulated and the position. I was like trying to tell him by, doing some indoor movements, showing like you want to put your hips like this and your upper body there. You don't want to bend your back so much, and wasn't really getting anywhere. And finally, several months later, comes up about like the inside pole. He was told by a very high level coach when he used to ski on the East Coast to never drag your inside pole. That's bad technique. It means you're leaning in. Don't do it. And so he took that advice from, I don't know, maybe 15 years prior to us meeting, has held onto that like he's never going to let go of it. And so he was trying to do things that I was suggesting, but then all the while not breaking that rule of letting the inside pole drag. And so all we did is like, hey, why don't you try it now? Let it drag, see what happens. Sorted a whole bunch of stuff out. His back stopped hurting a bit. He was skiing like with more confidence on steeper runs. So simple as that, like the baggage he had from this coach who had, and that's the other thing, got to be careful of like when people with, like even me giving this advice to other people, if I've got some weight behind, what I'm saying, people believe it even more, and that can be dangerous. So yeah, I've really learned to ask questions, a lot more questions of like, do you believe in this, and why are you doing that, and someone told you this, and why, that sort of stuff, to help solve problems.
It's
so
funny.
people without that baggage are much easier.
It's funny you
to
say
teach.
that. There's I forget the name of the guy now, but I was looking into it recently. He's a back specialist, and he came up with his program because he told someone came in to see him. He's a guy from New Zealand, I think. Someone came to see him, and he said, "Okay, just lie on the bed. I'll be back. Give me 2 minutes." He went out the room, came back, and they were laying on a bed like this, but face down, like almost like in a cobra pose, but they were lying the wrong way, essentially.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then he was like, and then the person was like, "Yeah, my back feels great now." And he was like, "You," and then and it was almost through by accident. Then it took him down a route of, right, let's explore this sort of thing. Like I had a mate of mine who was a race coach, and he said he was skiing. I won't say his name because maybe not the best thing, but he was skiing with a drill in between the things, and he had his drill facing the wrong way. But because of that, it was a heavy drill, and it made him like have to hold it a certain way, like off the snow. But he was just messing about, right, like we all do, trying to get some angles. And he noticed that he was like then dragging like his whole, almost the bottom of the drill with the forearm, like whole, and it was just it just almost unlocked like that. It just unlocked the little something in his head. It's like because he was so focused about this part, whereas normally he's thinking about his legs or his feet or whatever. It just changed the way he could like have a bit of freedom of movement, and it's just So what just reminded me of then was that I think when you think a certain way or someone tells you something, it's like try it.
Try it.
But but yeah, be open to what sort of happens. There was one you reminded
Yeah.
me with the ecological coaching. I forget which book it's in now. I should remember. It was one of the Cladwell ones. But they talk about table tennis pros. Did you hear that one where there was one table tennis guy who just seemed to have like a slightly quicker reaction speed than everybody else? And then they realized that he grew up, he learned in his garage, and he could only stand like X amount away from the table because of where the wall was.
Right.
So he learned, and that's the environment that he had.
Yep.
So as a result, his like the speed of reaction was just ever so slightly faster than someone that was another foot or 2 feet away from the table. It's just yeah. And there was one they talked about.
So that would be that, like in that ecological approach, they talk about constraints-based learning fits into that. So that would be, you know, we set up the table tennis table in a very small room where we're stuck right near it, and we have to, you know, not be able to move that far. I mean, there's so many examples where that's the case. So I think it's like I'm really looking forward to this season, trying to explore more of those types of like that sort of advice to my skiers, to get them to find new things. Like even I love that idea with the drill. Those sort of things are brilliant. Like, you know, why it's fantastic to go, if you're used to skiing on a slalom ski, go and ski on a pair of 188 GS skis for a whole bunch of time and figure out, you know, what you have to do to make them work. You don't have to always be telling people how to do it. Like the task, you know, the objectives, the goals are the things that will end up teaching the person. It'll be far more powerful because they'll problem solve their way out of it. And humans like solving problems. It's a human nature thing.
And you've probably found that over the years, right? Like the times where you've told someone to do it and you're like, I know this is right for you. But then even if they try it a different way and they've come up with it themselves, they're much more likely to do that again, or they have more control over the degree of the outcome, like the volume of it. They can tone it down or tone it up. Where I always find that's an interesting one. It just sprung to mind then as well, like up on the glacier a few years ago. Zenhausen was up there with a humongous backpack on, like Ron LeMaster used to talk about in his, you know, changing where the weight is up in the body to create different things, in terms of like levers. You know, he's whatever he is, 6'10" slalom skier. You know, there's not many of him around. So, you know, it's almost like, what can he use that he's got that other people don't as an advantage, and that sort of stuff. So it's so interesting. I was going to ask about, you know, books or podcasts that you find yourself recommending to people. So obviously you've got the ecological coaching one that you're on at the moment, but are there things like over the last few years, obviously you are somebody now that people approach to develop their coaching and their skiing, is there things you find recommending a lot?
Yes, I think the best book I've read at the moment, I keep talking about it to people, is a book called Range by David Epstein. And I believe the title is, you know, how generalists thrive over specialists. I've probably butchered that wrong, but but yeah, the book is called Range.
Okay.
And so that's kind of fascinating. It actually sort of encompasses a lot of what we've talked about today. You know, saying that you don't have to, the way you get better at something, you don't have to just keep going in the same trench of that particular sport, that particular modality, skill, whatever it is. Stepping out of that, and often in completely unrelated areas, is going to help you solve problems that come along the way in your, you know, goal of becoming a master at something. And that's really been, you know, one of the most helpful things is, like you mentioned, my son Archie, who turns 7 in about a week.
Wow.
And you feel pressure as a parent, like, God, okay, if he's got some skill as a soccer player, I should probably be, you know, acting on this now, putting him in the academy, and but what about tennis and you know, or skiing, you know, those sorts of things. This guy really put me at ease, because he just basically says that's probably not a lot of the research he looks at. It's not really what you need to do to create someone that is going to thrive in this world. Having a greater range of skills in lots of different areas later on and through time is what actually turns out to be really useful. So one of the main ones he talks about is like the Tiger Woods story versus the Roger Federer story. And so most people, you knew that Tiger Woods grew up, from 2 years old with a golf club, right, Steve? And, prodigy, and so specialized. So that is kind of the thing that we think about. If your son, your daughter is going to become the next best skier, better get them skiing from 1 year old in, race club, doing as much as they can. However, he then brings up Roger Federer and his story. And Roger Federer didn't specialize in tennis early on. His mum was a coach, but she didn't want to coach him, and she found him annoying. And so he was a wrestler. He played football, soccer, all sorts of different sports, and only specialized much later in his life. And we know how great Roger Federer is. And so that really has put my mind at ease and has made sense of a lot of things. Even back to the first question, how did you go so well? And I didn't grow up skiing. I grew up cross country skiing once a year, maybe. So then that's, not really, that specialization thing is not there. So range, very, 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 very good book. And then the other one I would just say, I'll give two, that I think is really good, is How to Have a Beautiful Mind. And that is by, here we go, Edward de Bono.
Okay.
So
I'll put links to all
here.
these down below as well. Anything we think.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And what's cool about that one is it is short little sort of snippets. So you can kind of just open it and just read one page, or even just like a summary of it. Like, here we go, How to Be Interesting summary. It is always important to get to the truth, but being interesting is more important than winning an argument. You owe it to yourself and to others to be interesting. So I sometimes just pick it up and go, that's some good advice for today. I don't have to be right in this conversation. Just interesting.
Like we've spoken about this before, about this podcast and like learning in the locker room and that sort of stuff. I remember when my first season in America, we used to have training in the morning I remember it was, and then a Tuesday, I used to have like these local kids all day. And so what my coach told me in the morning on that Tuesday, I then did for 6 hours with those kids, like practiced and did it in different ways. And I remember that was huge for me, because I remember thinking that, we had whatever it was, half an hour when we had first lifts, basically like a couple of runs for like half an hour. And then I would take that and then explore it for essentially the rest of the day with the kids in like a playful sort of way. And I remember thinking that, and I know when you're in Threadbow, you ran it a similar way, right? Like it's a lot of training in the morning, or you'd go on to Friday flat and you'd have like maybe throw some concepts out or whatever. And then hopefully it's interesting enough to spark something in that instructor's head that they will think about it as the day goes on or as the week goes on. And I always find that I got told this as well by a good coach. When I was in Perisher, we had to write down what we did for the training. So we'd write down a theme. So I'd be like, right, instructor Steve, what the theme for the session was, where it was, what terrain we used, yada, yada. And then I'd hand it into the training manager. And I remember the following morning, one time handing it in. And he asked me, how did it go? He just took it, whatever, put it on the side and was like, how was it? And I was like, oh yeah, I think I would have, it's a classic one. I was like, so it invested. I was like, I just spoke too much, right? I got too into it and we didn't ski as much as we should have, always the same thing. And I think maybe I overcooked it, because this morning, like on the ski tube, one of the instructors came up to me and was asking me about the session yesterday. And I was like, I took it as like, I didn't really get it, and he was like, no, that's amazing. He's like, the fact that they're thinking about it after the session, like what more could you ask for? you know, it's like we've all had those sessions, like maybe we've been in one and it's like, oh, okay, that was whatever, and you've left it, and that's such a shame. Whereas like,
Yeah.
surely there's, you know, if there's something there, and if people are thinking about it after, they should have questions. It's almost like encouraging. I read that wrong. I framed that wrong in my own head. I thought I had failed as the trainer because they were asking me questions, but it wasn't necessarily anything wrong. It was just that they were exploring it in their own mind and taking it their own way, which I think is an interesting concept. If you now, knowing what you know now, if you were a mentor to a young Tom starting out on his coaching, teaching, instructing journey, what is something you would say to him?
I was thinking about this when you asked in the beginning, and you know what my honest answer would be? I wouldn't give him any advice at all, because I really love where I've come and all the things that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd hate for me to get in the way of going through and learning all these different things along the way and get to where I'm at. So I just feel that, you know, things come to you at the right time when you're ready for them. A bit like you mentioned before, being open-minded to a mentor giving you a suggestion. So yeah, maybe it would just be that there's going to be opportunities that come along. Just be ready to try those things. But yeah, I think there's so much advice in this day and age. My bit of advice is like, go out and like walk it, experience it, like stuff things up. Because it's so satisfying when you do figure it out yourself, or you feel like, you know, you've been helped along the way, but you kind of discover something, you solve a problem, you overcome a barrier, you see things in a new way. That's what keeps me going, like searching outside of skiing, outside of sport for new things. So I wouldn't get in the way of myself.
Perfect. But just two things, because obviously I want to talk about big picture, because I think it's good. Everyone obviously that follows me, I assume, follows you as well, and that sort of thing. And so where over the next few years, obviously there's lots of cool things going on with big picture, what's upcoming over the next couple of years or this season, if you want to talk about that. And then secondly, some thoughts on that you're playing with in your own skiing this coming up.
Okay. Well, big picture skiing, the main thing is I'm just trying to continue building out this library of videos. So at the moment, I'm re-editing a video on how I teach the retraction extension exercise. And so I did that a couple of years ago, but I look at it now and I don't like it. Needs redoing, cutting, you know, with everything I've learned now, is redoing. So basically, I'm going to continue to build that library and fill it in with more tasks like we were talking about. Hey, this is the task, so set it up. This is what you're looking for within the environment. This is like some possible pitfalls. So then people are just set up to go and learn through just the help of this video. So that's kind of the main thing. I'm enjoying doing a few clinics, like camps here and there, the online coaching as well, because there's the challenge of not being there. So using technology these days is really cool. I'm enjoying that part. Now, in terms of my own skiing, I had this really great day at the very last day that I skied in Australia this season with a couple of we call them the Dutchies. These and there's one Danish guy as well, but they're from the Netherlands. Fantastic skiers. They're all sort of have their Austrian Startlicher certification, so high level Austrian trained skiers. And we went out and this guy Maritz and I, we worked on this double edge pressure drill. So yeah, I've put it on my Instagram. Anyway, it's been around for ages. High level Austrian exercise where you try and do a quick, fast edging movement a couple of times in a turn. So once at around the fall line, another time just after. That was the tempo we were working on. And that set up a really cool learning environment that sort of, at first both Maritz and I were not great at it. We were okay at it. But as we practiced more and we sat on the chair and shared things like, you know, I think what's happening here is you're not moving your weight inside the turn fast enough and low enough, and you're not releasing the edges quick enough. So let's try that. And we'd go back and forth. Anyway, so I discovered that I think I need just a faster release of the edges, not an earlier release, just a faster release after the pressures come on at a certain point in my short turns. And I really liked how some of those turns came out, and actually felt kind of easier to deal with fast tempo, higher energy turns. So that's one thing I want to continue playing with in my skiing. Bump skiing is my favorite.
Yeah,
pretty sure it's my favorite dive skiing. I've loved pushing into new territory there, and because I think there's more. It feels like there's a bit more to play with moguls, because there's the terrain, the affordances you've got to jump off things, to get pushed around by things, to like change your line. There's so many opportunities there. So I really want to continue playing with line in the moguls and my head. So I chatted with this guy, Ryuji Kuwabara. He's this Japanese technical skier, and he's an amazing bump skier. So he used to do competitive moguls. And I chatted over Zoom with him just before the Aussie ski season started, and I showed him some video of me skiing bumps, and then I was asking him a bunch of questions about mogul skiing and getting his opinion on it. And the one thing that really stuck with me was to do with my head. So I showed him this bump skiing that was pretty good. So now I look at it and I don't like it because of what he pointed out. But anyway, some Hakuba, this steep, fairly steep pitch that they do the competition on, and moguls everywhere, giant moguls skiing down there, absorbing, like, with lots of range. But in his rough translation, I said, what could I do to improve it? Is it my line? He's like, no, it's good, and this and that, more absorption. No. It's like your head. It's like, what about my head? It's too far in front, and like very subtly, my head is in front of my chest, or just sticking out a little bit further head, which everyone does when they try and get forward. Their head moves, leads the way. It's like, keep it back, keep it in line, and hold it more steady. And so I've been working on really like knowing where my head is and not letting it get ahead of my upper body, because then I don't get this kind of chicken head, like bam, like being kind of like folded as much. Because you think about it, like your head sits on top of your spine, so it's this weight. And if you're kind of just not really aware of it and having it in front, when you hit something and your upper body wants to keep traveling forward, that momentum keeps wanting to travel forward, but your feet slow down as they hit a bump, of course it's going to act like this big heavy kind of lever and whip and pull everything down and ruin your absorption. So I'm really going to focus on the head, and it helped a lot in terms of keeping my core in, like, still and engaged. That's the thing. You could have the strongest core in the world, but if your head is not really a part of that whole thing, it's just going to undo it all, or you're just going to have this weird, this nodding, this chicken head going dunk 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 down through the moguls. And now I see it everywhere, and like it's the first thing I see when I watch people ski moguls. I watch their head, and it's like so many people don't manage their head well.
So I spent a lot of time in the bumps in ours, and one of the things we used to do with our kids a lot, because we were fortunate enough obviously to spend time with all the Olympic teams, right? They would all come and ski in the same area that we were, but everybody watches bumps from the bottom and looks up, and they think, oh yeah, they're still, their body's so still and their shoulders are still, and it's just their wrists. But if you watch it from the side, the whole chain is moving like as a unit. But like you said, thinking back now, I had that running through my head when you were talking about the head thing. And that's something that always would fascinate me with like the physique of the bump skiers, and the way they all look like gymnasts, and they had like phenomenal like posture, like the way that their head would sit on top of their over their ribs and their hips, and like, yes, that would move, but it's interesting. So it's interesting you say that. I thought a lot about that recently with running. I started doing more trail running and getting a bit, as we all do, like just YouTubing it and getting into it. And one of the big things is the head and how much more force it puts through your neck, even just being like a centimeter forward. I can't remember the exact maths, but it adds an incredible amount of strain. And then obviously that makes everything really tight in the neck and the shoulders, which then of course affects the core, like you said. But no, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And
can't wait for skiing.
Oh, it's great. And but when you say that as well, it made me think that could, we talk a lot about vision in the bumps as well, like where are you looking? And it brought me back to when I did do the stuff with you in Australia. And I remember saying to you, like, because I'm quite tall and it's always like rounded shoulders, head put forward. And then after I worked with you that time, I remember saying, because I remember Paulie was like, what you are? I remember thinking my eyes felt like they were in a different spot in my head. Like I was looking out a different way because of the like orientation of my head.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just remember it stuck in my mind because I remember Paul going like, what are you on about? But then and it made sense to me with the eye thing. But then of course in the bumps, people talk, don't they? Oh, you must look up. But then, of course, if you're in like a bump stance with most people, and then they try and look up, like that's only going to like pull and arch their head forward.
That's the thing I learned, because I took at first, because I asked the Japanese guy, I said, so like this, and I took the information that I had from structural integration, good posture and everything, into this ski position, and he's like, no. I went, oh. And actually, you do have your chin up. You just don't have your chin forward. You have your chin up because when you're in a like skiing the moguls, your upper body is tilted forward, and so you don't want to be looking kind of out the top of your eyes. That way. You want to lift your chin, but you want to bring your head back a little bit in line with the spine. And I just feel like. It just feels like to me, these neck muscles on the side here, it felt like I had to really like engage them. So this sternocleidomastoid on the left and right, that felt like what was kind of the missing ingredient. So not so much tucking the chin, because when I did that in a mogul position, it does actually feel it feels a bit weak.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have your head up here, you can keep it. It feels far like, not sticking way out, but Chin up. He was like, no, chin up, not chin tucked.
Chin up.
So there's another example. It's like if I hadn't asked him, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I know. Okay, yeah, so you got to have the head. I would have taken what I knew before. I would have probably done the same. Ended up doing the same turns, or it wouldn't have worked. And then I got, well, try something else.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what he said was rubbish. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah. People always think that. Don't really think like, he must have meant it for me. That's always the thing, isn't it? Like, no, it's just maybe I didn't hear it the right way, or I haven't tried it the right way.
That's it.
All right, mate. That's awesome. Thank you. We're over an hour now, and I know you're a busy guy, so you've got to get off. But no, I appreciate your everything you said, and there's been tons of great stuff that people are gonna take from this. I think
awesome. So, thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you.